Good evening, and thank you for coming to join us for this evening's program. My name is Constance, and I'm working here with my colleague Stefana, and we welcome you tonight. Before we begin, I want to let you know that after the presentation, we will be taking questions and answers. You can ask your questions by clicking on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. If you scroll down, the bottom bar will pop up and you can see a Q&A. You just click on that and then you can type in your question. And then at the end, I will ask the questions after our presentation is finished. And so now I will turn the presentation over to Stefana.
Thank you, Constance. Thank you for being here this evening. This evening, we have the good fortune to have Flo Schilling here as our guest speaker. She's going to talk to us a little bit about Bulgaria and Romania, a journey that she took with a group of friends and longtime friends and travelers. They've traveled together for over, I think she said over 20 years they've been traveling together. Bulgaria and Romania are two East European countries whose rugged terrain and isolation have helped preserve their diverse heritage. Flo Schilling and a group of longtime friends and travelers were introduced to the complex history and fascinating culture of this region. They traveled through rustic mountain village as well as visited many UNESCO World Heritage sites. Flo has been a travel agent in the Napa Valley for over 40 years. Tonight, she brings a remarkable journeys presentation called Through the Valley of the Roses to the Painted Monasteries. It's my pleasure this evening to welcome Flo Schilling.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this evening of, well, I will be taking you on my last trip to Bulgaria and Romania, which took place May 2nd, 2019 for 13 days with my group of friends, and we were 10 on the private tour, which was done by Adventures Transylvania. In front of you, you are seeing a map of Europe and Bulgaria and Romania position. As you could see, below Bulgaria is Turkey, and to the east of Romania is actually northeast is Ukraine, and then you have Hungary and also Greece below, and also how close Italy is also. Our trip started from San Francisco. We flew on Turkish Airlines nonstop to Istanbul. And after the 2-hour layover, we arrived in the capital city of Bulgaria, which is Sofia. Bulgaria is known as the oldest country in Europe. Sofia's turbulent history dates back some 7,000 years with its first inhabitants, the Thracian tribe, Serdi. The Romans conquered the city in 29 BC and called it Serdica. It was later occupied by the Huns, the Visigoths, the Avars, and the Slavs. The Ottoman, which are the Turkish tribes, took over in 1384 until 1878. During the communist era and World War II, the center of Sofia was also heavily bombed. 1989 was the end of the communist era, and Bulgaria became a member of the European Union in 2007. This is a brief history of Bulgaria. I will take you through some of our highlights of the trip. Here is some Roman remains that were discovered in 2004 during the construction of the Sofia metro. The amphitheater of Serdica, which was built in the 3rd and 4th century, lay underneath a luxury hotel. Rather than filling it with concrete, the owners cleverly incorporated the remains into the basement floor. Sofia is well known for its mineral springs, which existed since the 16th century. Here you see a gentleman, actually a Bulgarian, filling his water with the spring water. I mean, his water jug with the spring water. This is Sofia's Central Mineral Bath, which was used as a city public bath from 1913 to 1986. It is now a history museum. This is the Banya Bashi Mosque with a big dome and minaret, which was built in 1566 during the years where the Ottoman took control of the city. The Sveta Nedelya Church is an Orthodox church destroyed numerous times and reconstructed in the Byzantine revival style. In front of us here is the Rotunda of St. George Church, the oldest building in Bulgaria. It was constructed in the 4th century as a temple, then a church during the Roman Empire, and a mosque during the Turks' invasion. St. Nicholas Church, built as the official church of the Russian embassy in the neo-Gothic and Baroque revival style. The next church here is the Alexander Nevsky Church. It is the third largest Orthodox church, and it can hold up to 5,000 people inside. It is built in the Neo-Byzantine style and served as the cathedral church of the Patriarch of Bulgaria. This is the frescoes and then the icons, inside the church. Leaving the capital city of Sofia, we head south to the deep valley of the Rila River to the Rila Monastery, which you're seeing in front of you. It was built in 876 and houses around 60 monks. Here we see gold-plated walls of icons and religious paintings and frescoes. Plovdiv, the second largest city in Bulgaria, was originally a Thracian settlement. It was invaded by Persians, Greeks, Celts, Romans, Goths, Huns, Bulgars, Slavs, Crusaders, and Turks. Finally, in 2019, Plovdiv was inaugurated as the European capital of culture. This is a city with the cobblestone street. And this is the Roman ancient amphitheater of Philippopolis, which sits around 6,000 and now hosts operas and concerts. North of Bulgaria is the city of Veliko Tarnovo, better known also as the capital of the Bulgarian Empire. Here is the medieval fortress of Tsarovets. Constructed near the end of the 5th century, it is often comparable to Rome and Constantinople in magnificence. This was how the fortress was during the time. It is the patriarchal cathedral or of the Holy Ascension of the Lord. Here we see the cathedral of the Holy Ascension of the Lord, and house modern and dramatic frescoes. Bulgarian cuisine is tasty, healthy, and nutritious. The cooking traditions are diverse. This is a sample of the lunch we had, which comprised of vegetable with a Mediterranean flair. And then some of our happy travelers in front of all this food that we could hardly finish. Heading north, we are now going to Romania, and this is as we cross the river and going to the border and into Romania. The name Romania comes from the Latin word Romanus, which means citizen of the Roman Empire. The first inhabitants of Romania were the Dacians. The Romans invaded Romania for 200 years, then came the Hungarian and the German tribes. The Ottoman Empire ruled in the 15th century. Through all these battles and invasions, Vlad Dracula, nicknamed also Vlad Tipis or Vlad the Impaler, was a Romanian prince and military leader who fought bravely against the invading Turkish army. We always associate Romania with Dracula. The Count Dracula, the vampire, was created and was a fiction by Irish writer Bram Stoker in 1897. This is the Stats Theopolis church built by a Greek monk in 1724 in the capital city of Bucharest. At the Revolution Square, this memorial of rebirth commemorates the struggles and the victims of the 1989 revolution, which overthrew the communist regime. It was from 1947 to 1989 that Romania was ruled by two communist dictators who did immeasurable damage to Romania's culture and economy. The Palace of the Parliament was the creation of the dictator Nicolae Ceausescu. It is the heaviest building in the world, with the height of 84 meters and comprised of 12 floors and 1,100 rooms. It is the second largest building in the world after the Pentagon. As Romanians face food shortage, blackout, and gas cuts, $2 billion were poured into the massive project. An entire neighborhood had to be bulldozed, and 40,000 people were displaced, including several monuments, churches, and a 16th century monastery. This is the Cathedral of Curtea de Arges, a Roman Orthodox cathedral with pale gray limestone. The church is an amazing piece of architecture resembling a very large and elaborate mausoleum with arabesque. The interior is decorated with biblical frescoes. Alba Iulia, it is one of the oldest citadel with history dating back to the Roman period. In the Middle Ages, Alba Iulia served as the residence of the Transylvanian princes. We are now going to the Maramureş region, better known for its wooden churches, farmhouses fronted by ornately carved gates. Wood is the primary resource of the region and has been used since a long time ago by locals to build houses, carve intricate wooden gates, and build churches. The skills of craftsmen are visible in the imposing roofs, the tall, narrow churches, towers, and the fish-like shape of the shingles, which are here, as you could see the shingles. This is another one, another magnificent wooden gate. one more here. And here we are looking at the Church of Sudersti, a Greek Catholic church dating from 1721. It is the highest olden wooden church in the world. There's the church. And then the inside, of the church, which is quite amazing with all the remains. This is Parsana Monastery. The interior paintings depict scenes of religious events combined with laic motifs that reflect people's everyday lives and beliefs. This is the Lud wooden church, a 14th century church with gorgeous mural paintings. The Mary Cemetery. It is unique in the world for the colorful tombstones with beautiful paintings and narrations celebrating the life of the deceased in a poetic manner. We were told that, for example, if you were a music director like this gentleman, he would be there accompanied by his students, or and then of course this would be the epitaph about his life, and everything in humor, with humor and all. This is a salt mine which dates back in 1271. Active mining took place from the 17th century to the first half of the 20th century. It was open to tourists since 2010. It is a theme park and a halotherapy center. In the heart of the mine, you have a lake with rowboats, bowling alleys, ping pong tables, and more. Romania is home to more castles, citadels, and fortresses than one might expect. Most of them suffered neglect over the centuries and remain in a dismal state until recent years. Here we are seeing the fortress of Raznov. Off to the painted monasteries. Located in the northeast area of Romania, Bucovina painted monasteries are truly one-of-a-kind sights. The exterior walls of the monasteries were painted in colorful frescoes. The scenes feature masterpieces of saints, prophets, Jesus, angels, demons, heaven, hell, and more. Originally, they were painted to make the stories of the Bible available to all of the surrounding villagers. The inside here, and that's a view of the beautiful painted church. This is Kalnik Fortress. It was erected in the 13th century by a Transylvanian nobleman. It became the refuge for the villagers of Kalnik. Inside of the fortress. And there's the fortress, the tower. Corvin Castles. This is a fairy tale castle in the heart of Transylvania. Corvin Castle is one of the largest and most impressive ones in Eastern Europe. It was built in the 14th century in real medieval architecture with pointed turrets and an imposing entrance bridge. And this is our group. And there's the bridge, if you want to see a little more. And the happy group. There's the courtyard of the castle. And this is Bran Castle, which is also referred to Dracula's castle. But Bran Castle was established as a fortress by the Teutonic Knights as part of the defense system against the Mongolian invasions. The castle sits in a strategic location up on the cliff on the passageway between Transylvania and Wallachia in the Carpathian Mountains. Contrary to the popular belief, Bram Stoker character Dracula didn't have any connection with Bran Castle. Vlad the Impaler only connection with Bran was through an alliance that he did during his first reign with the Princess of Transylvania, who asked him to handle the anti-Ottoman resistance at the border. And there's Vlad Tepes or Vlad the Impaler. That's his photo. This is also the fortress of Rasnov with, very impressive door. And it is one of the most spectacular strongholds of Transylvania. It was built in 13th century also by the Teutonic Knights. It was enlarged by the villagers of Rasnov, and it became a small walled city protecting the villagers from the invaders. Palace Castle. This was the last, the royal hunting retreat of Carol the First, King of Romania. It remained in the royal family until 1947, when the communists seized all the royal properties, forcing the King of Romania to abdicate. This is the inside of the castle, just beautiful. A lot of precious wood. Romania is picturesque and a fascinating country. The beautiful cities with the cobblestone street and the stunning countrysides were a feast for the eyes. This is Sibiu, which is with the Transylvanian Saxons as the first settlers in 1191. It is the largest of the 7 walled city of Romania. The population is mainly of German background and ethnicity. Cluj-Napoca, or better known as Cluj, is the second largest city in Romania. It is a vibrant cultural and university center of Transylvania. Here we see more of the younger people here. This is the opera house of Cluj. Sighisoara, the city where Vlad the Impaler was born. It is a charming medieval fortified city. Here we are at Brasov, which is better known for its Black Church. It's called Black Church because it was actually, it survived the fire in 1689. This is Brasov. And it is also well known for its beautiful red roofs. I'm going to be traveling a little bit, and I am showing a little bit more of the pictures of the scenic part of the countryside of Romania. Which, you know, from the bus, the pictures don't even do justice to what we actually experienced and saw. Just amazing. This is the Carpathians Mountain. And on this, and we were told on the other side of the hill is Ukraine. So we were at the border between Romania and Ukraine. This is a Moldovan home with beautifully painted pictures in the front of the house. Just another village. And up in Bukovina, which is more up in the Carpathian Mountains. This is more Moldovan home and more like Austrian, German type chalets. And Romanian food is a mix of dishes and cooking techniques borrowed from neighboring cultures such as Hungarian, German, Turkish, and Slavic, I should say. The cabbage rolls is the national dish, as well as the meatballs and stews. This is a stew one of us had. And there's the cabbage rolls. For dessert, the papanasi, a fried cheese donuts with sour cream and blueberry jam, was rather good and healthy and very good to end the meal. Here we go.
Okay, if you want to have any questions, feel free to type them into the question and answer area, and we can get to those. And in the meantime, Flo had some friends who went with her, and I'm going to allow them to talk so that they can add to our her story.
Beautiful trip. I loved your presentation, Flo. It was fun to relive the trip with you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I mean, I've never been to Switzerland, but I thought I was in Switzerland.
Uh-huh.
When we were
there was a little bit of everything, huh?
Yeah. It was gorgeous.
And I was interested in the interaction of the people today, and my impression was about how politically aware they are, both of the United States and their situation and proximity to the Ukraine and the influences of Russia. I was very aware, very impressed with how aware they are.
Yeah, they say the country now is being ruled basically by some of the old school people from the Communist Party, although they're not as hardcore communist. One of the things we got to do is we got to go to one of the buildings run by the communists where, you know, they did interrogations and people disappeared. And, you know, it was pretty depressing.
Mm-hmm.
It was bad.
And to think it didn't end until 1989.
Right. I know. And then, of course, it was during our time when we were having kids, right? And raising and the thinking about that, you know, the Romanians were going through that. It's hard to believe that, yeah, it's fairly recent.
Right. And how they made it in
Yes.
I mean, basically if you were accused of anything, it then would keep your children from being able to go to school, or your son and daughter being able to get a job. And I mean, it was horrible.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Something we're fortunate we never had to experience ourselves, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
No, we don't know what it's like to live with that lack of freedom and the oppression that they experienced, and the terror of being caught and imprisoned, killed, disappeared, loss of everything.
Indeed.
Actually,
Okay, I have a question. I have a question for John and Mary Alice. We're now able to see you. And so I wanted to ask, what were some of your favorite parts of traveling? Was there a specific experience that really stood out for you?
I thought that the people in both countries were very, very friendly. I had always thought of Bulgaria as an Eastern European country, but it had a very European feel to it. It felt very European, and I was surprised by that. And Romania was geographically a very beautiful country. It had mountains with snow. It was very, very scenic. I enjoyed that a lot too.
And I was impressed with the difference between the two countries. I don't know what I expected, but Bulgaria has that Byzantine history and Romania has the Roman history, to the point where I was listening to a conversation between our guide and the bus driver, and I understand some Italian, and I thought they were speaking Italian, only to realize that indeed they were speaking Romanian, but the two languages, Romanian and Italian, were so close that I mistook them.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
John ran off to get one of our favorite little,
There you go, sweetie.
was when we went to, do you remember the name of the
Lucia Condrea was the artist, and it was a little shop we went to in
The painted
Moldavia.
egg. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's so beautifully
It's
painted.
very detailed.
Oh my God.
Yes.
It's hard to see, but it's really very.
And that was so great to be able to go into the little museum that they had of her eggs, and
there were hundreds of them,
Mm-hmm.
all sizes. Some were really big, and they were all very, very detailed. You know, it looks like it would take hours and hours and hours to make any one of them.
Mm-hmm.
It must have been hard to select the right one.
Yeah, I would. I don't know.
they sure were. I love this egg.
How many did you buy?
One, just the one.
They weren't
Yeah.
cheap.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah, I'm wearing my bracelet.
Oh yeah, we have our bracelets too.
I'm not, yes.
The bracelet. It's always remind me of the trip whenever I wear something of the country, you know. I mean,
What is it made of?
we try
Is
not to forget, you know, all the good times.
They're
made of beads
they're
or- I
woven.
can't tell.
They're beads woven with some kind of stretchy thread, and
Yeah.
so that they slip on, but they're completely woven. All of those patterns are handmade.
I know the work behind it, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're
Look at
gorgeous.
that.
I was and I was remembering too that they had such strict regulations on the tour people for how many hours they could be driving the bus.
That's true. After 2 days, or right, they have to rest 2 days, right?
Right.
And they couldn't do more than a couple I mean, there's a certain number of hours in a row. When they picked us up in Bulgaria, we stopped at a gas station and walked around because they couldn't go on until
Because
they rested an
they're
hour.
monitored, and so yeah, we had to stay there for a while before they
Mhm.
could go on the road again. But
Yeah.
it was a beautifully organized trip, that's for sure.
Definitely.
Thank you.
And who would have known all of the history, you know?
Well, exactly. I think the whole time our mouth was open. What?
What? Right.
What? Who?
And to be conquered over and over. Oh, and wasn't this a trip where they had the strong Turkish army because they
Oh yeah.
what was that called? When they took the young people from all the village, they had to give their young boys to build the army, the Turkish army. There was a name for it.
The blood tax.
The blood tax. Do you remember that?
Oh,
So
vaguely.
So the army was so strong because there was a blood tax, and the villages had to give their boys to this army, and they left their village. They never saw their family.
Never saw them again. They were in the
Mhm.
army for the rest of their life, in the Turkish
Mhm.
army.
And they groomed these boys, and it was such a strong army. But every year the villagers had to pay the blood tax, donate
Mhm.
their children.
Mm.
Not donate, they had to give them up.
Yes.
Yeah.
The blood tax, that's right, I forgot about that.
Well, I have a question from Richard. And he says both Romania and Bulgaria were at one point part of the Soviet Union, a repressive system that constrained whole populations. Did you have any sense of that history when traveling through the cities, towns, and countryside?
Well, except at when we were at the museum, the Siget Museum, and we had all the peoples who were, imprisoned, and that was definitely part of the regime. So.
And-
Our guides were fairly young. Well, compared to us, they were fairly young, but they still had they were still very aware that had gone on and discussed it a lot, especially in the capital of, I guess it's Bucharest, or is that one of them? And when they were showing us where the revolution actually happened, and they showed us the new building that Flo showed us pictures of. And they showed us basically a concentration camp building, the secret police's headquarters, where people were clearly tortured, and it was an awful place. And so that was in their minds, and in their minds also was the fact that some of those people were still running the country. It wasn't a communist thing anymore. They didn't have like absolute power, but the same elite group is still running the country. And they didn't like that. They felt, constrained in ways. They felt constrained, that there were things they shouldn't do, and they led me to believe that in some sense it was a democratic place, but those people had gotten voted in. There's kind of division in the country. There's the old people who kind of don't like the old style, but vote for for those people, and the younger people who don't like it at all and are voting differently. And I guess eventually the old people will die off and it'll flip. But I mean, our guides were aware of it, but they felt free to speak about it, at least to some extent.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a couple of encounters. One was listening to our guide who talked about the proximity of Russia through the Ukraine and the worry that Romania could be one of the next targets for Putin. And our guide actually had a plan of action for he and his family to leave Romania in a hurry, if necessary, and go west into Europe. And so he was very aware of the potential for a change in the Romanian political environment that would take them backwards. I also encountered an older woman at one of the painted churches, and she spoke Romanian, and because I understood some Italian, somehow I was able to communicate with her. And she was very, very concerned about Putin's potential for power in Romania. And she was very concerned about our political leaders' friendship with Putin, to the point where she felt that that was a possible, very heavy negative impact on all of Europe. And so there were two generations of people very aware and very concerned about potential influence of Putin and Russia.
Mhm.
And that was contemporary. That's now.
Mhm.
Okay, the second part of his question was, he says, I wonder if you know of the poet Andrei Codrescu, hopefully I'm saying that right, who's from Transylvania. He is now an American citizen, but he still tends to sound like Bela Lugosi. Have you heard of him, or did you hear anything about him?
No,
Not that I know of.
not that I know.
I know that we spent a night in a hotel or someplace, and that there was the home of a famous
I thought
writer.
it was right. Yeah, a poet.
And it might be the same guy, but the name isn't ringing a bell yet.
Mhm.
But we were, and we did spend the night next to the home of a famous Romanian writer or poet. I don't remember exactly what. It was a name that I was familiar with, but I'm not remembering it.
Mhm.
Okay, any other questions? He thanks you for answering those questions for him. Any other questions? Feel free to type them in the chat box or in the Q&A box.
Well, I really appreciate Flo and her guests coming and talking to us tonight about their experience. If there are no other questions, I think we've come to the end of our program. I do want to tell you that we are going to take a December break, but we're going to be back with another Remarkable Journeys program in January, on Thursday, January 21st at 7 p.m. And Jerry Hasser will present 2020 road trips, safely escaping COVID and smoke. So Jerry has he presented a number of programs for us, but usually it's an international travel, and he had not been able to do that, but he did take the opportunity to do some travel in the Western states, and he's going to talk a little bit about that. So again, we'll see you on Thursday, January 21st. And thank you all so very much for your comments. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you
All right.
for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good night.
All right.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Good night.